Morning, everyone. The subcommittee meeting will come to order. We're here to consider Senate File 457, a bill for an act relating to surcharges added to criminal penalties, court funds, civil fees, misdemeanor, and felony fines and fines associated with scheduled violations. Joining me on the subcommittee, Representative Wolfe and Representative Hein. At this time, those members of the public or lobby groups that are here, if you would like to identify yourselves, if you would like to speak, you may identify yourself, tell us who you represent, tell us whether you're for or against the legislation. Anyone? Very well.
Do you want me to come to the table?
Yes. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Susan Damon. I lobby for the Iowa State Sheriff's and Deputies Association. We just became aware of this amendment last night, but we reviewed most of it as much as I could point out. And we supported the work that was being done on this legislation prior to COVID. We supported the efforts by the Senate and House working together to address some of these criminal surcharges. We especially support the provision that will equalize better what different public safety officers get for the fines that are written. Currently, for any schedule violation or traffic violation written by a deputy, they only get $5 on anything like that. So what this will do is provide, the 9% will provide some additional resources to actually never come close to covering their costs for what they do, but it will make it more equal to what other agencies get for writing the same kind of tickets. If this bill also goes a little bit further in adding additional crimes that they charge at the local level to get the 9%. That is important to us for the reason that as we look at other issues facing county law enforcement and those operating the jails, the courts have made it very clear that room and board fees, we must be able to demonstrate that the individual has reasonable ability to pay for room and board fees. And so this will help us to, if you know, those are being thrown out right and left right now. So this also will help a little bit, because in this also, it does add that we will be able to use some of the revenue that comes from this for our medical and prescription drug costs, which are a huge cost driver for the jails and the counties. I also wanted to mention that there is another bill out there, and if that passes and this wouldn't pass, the one related to providing increased dollars from increased speeding penalties to emergency medical services. We're supportive of funding for emergency medical services, easy to say at 8 a.m. They need it. We need it in rural Iowa. It's very important. You know, you all as policymakers will determine how you're going to fund that, if that's the way you want to fund that. We just want you to be aware that EMS will be getting a much larger payment for a speeding ticket written by a deputy. If this doesn't pass, the deputy gets $5 and the EMS is going to get those increased monies. Again, I want to be very clear, sheriffs and deputies are not against EMS being funded and actually know how critical that need is, but just wanted to show how the two interplay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Hi there, Caitlin Tarzan. Oh, sorry, what's that?
I need you to come up here.
Oh, okay, sorry. Here, sorry, I didn't catch that.
You don't. They want you on camera, so you need to move so that
I see. I'm sorry.
A little slow this morning.
Okay, good morning, Caitlin Tarzan with the Judicial Branch. I haven't seen this amendment. The last amendment I was aware of came out in March, so I'm speaking without full knowledge on the bill. And hopefully what I'm going to talk about has already been addressed by the amendment. The Judicial Branch is registered undecided on this bill. We did share concerns with Senator Dawson early on in session about the time it would take for us to implement all of the programming this bill would necessitate. Given that this bill, in theory, will be passing in June rather than April or May, it makes it very difficult, next to impossible, to take a bill that gets signed in June and have it fully implemented July 1. So that's our only real concern here, is just the practicality of programming. And I understand from discussing this with the judicial branch IT department that it is quite a bit of programming. And they do have a lot of unexpected things going on that have stemmed from COVID and trying to make court work the best it can across the state. So just trying to get all the programming done in that very short amount of time would be extremely difficult. That's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask the court administrator, liaison, a couple of questions? Thank you. Caitlin, I just want to ask a couple of questions about surcharges as they are currently in law. Currently, we have a $100 surcharge that's applied to convictions for domestic abuse assault or sexual abuse, stalking, and some other related offenses, correct? Okay, and this would raise it to $190, which is fine. When I looked at the code, it looks like that, you know, revenue generated by that surcharge is put into an address confidentiality revolving fund that effectively assists victims. Is that correct? Okay.
I'm sorry, I'd have to have the bill in front of me to be speaking certainly on it. I haven't read the full bill in several weeks.
Okay, you know what? I'm not going to ask you the other question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. This came up here suddenly. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else like to speak?
My name is Bruce Reeve. I'm the laboratory administrator for the DCI. Really, I'm just here to answer questions you might have regarding arguments for the bill.
Anyone else? Representative Hein, would you like to comment? Representative Wolfe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think there's a lot of good things in this bill. Again, I just got pointed to this committee last night, just got this amendment last night, so I haven't had a chance to go into it as much in depth as I would like, but I've seen other iterations of this bill over the past 2 years, served on subcommittees, so I get the gist of it, and I think the idea behind it is good. I think obviously we need to generate revenue for our crime laboratory. That's very important. One of my big concerns with this is the $500 agricultural theft surcharge in the bill, which is a new surcharge created by the bill on page 7 of the bill, section 20. We already have a lot of surcharges in Iowa code. One of the things this bill attempts to do is decrease the surcharge in some circumstances to, I think, effectuate some transparency in sentencing. So if someone is sentenced to a fine of $500, they don't then find out it's $500 plus a 35% surcharge as currently. So this bill knocks that down, I think, to 15% surcharge. We have for victims of domestic or sexual abuse related crimes, there is under the bill a $190 surcharge that is deposited into, as I said, the address confidentiality revolving fund, which helps victims who are trying to reestablish an identity away from their abuser. So that is a good use, good and reasonable use for that surcharge. There's a human trafficking surcharge of, I think, $100 that is deposited into the human trafficking assistance fund that goes to help victims of human trafficking. I think there are some other related surcharges that are directly, they're appropriated, allocated to help victims of the crime for which the surcharge is imposed. The $500 surcharge that's created in this bill, number one, it's more than twice as much as any other surcharge. I don't know where the $500 came from, but that seems extremely high in comparison to the surcharge we impose for people who violently rape children or women. And also, it's just, as far as I can tell, it would just be deposited into the general fund. So, you know, much like a fine, people convicted of either of agricultural theft, whether it's theft or criminal mischief, both of which are subject to the agricultural theft surcharge, are already required to pay, first of all, restitution to the victim. There's always going to be restitution in these cases of theft or criminal mischief. They're required to pay, or they can be required to pay a fine, any 35% surcharge on that fine, and they're required to pay the law enforcement initiative surcharge fee of $125, and then usually court costs and court-appointed attorney fees. So again, adding on top of that a kind of arbitrary $500 surcharge that apparently doesn't go to help victims of this crime or to help farmers, doesn't seem in keeping with the message of this bill, which is, I think, transparency in sentencing and also kind of common sense. I'm going to work with hopefully members of the majority party and my party to see if we can come up with a program that it would make sense to allocate this $500 surcharge to, whether that's beginning or new farmers, or whether it's a program that helps with food insecurity, something along that lines. If we can take this surcharge, which based on how things currently get collected, probably won't be collected very often because it's going to be kind of at the bottom of the hierarchy of things that are collected from criminal defendants. But to the extent it is collected, I would like to see it allocated to some specific program, much like most of the other criminal surcharges that we have in code. So at this time, I'll be no on the bill. There's a lot of good in it, and I hope that we can find some way to address that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wolfe. So I would just comment, from having worked with this bill for several years, I would just comment on some of the positive things it does before we close up. And basically, we're talking about it doing 30 years of legislative incremental, basically a mess in these fines and fees. So it streamlines the fine sentencing process and benefits the state and the defendant. This bill, for the first time ever, provides a funding stream of $2 million to the crime lab to reduce the sexual assault kit and firearm ballistics backlogs. This bill, for the first time ever, provides a funding stream for EMS, rural EMS, at $1.1 billion, which I think is very important. The bill eliminates the court fees for adoptions, which someone who is pro-life, I think that is something that is very important that we do in a way that we can encourage adoption. So this bill eliminates the court fees for adoptions. The bill eliminates civil penalties for driver's license reinstatement. That's 17,000 processes a year, and that's a cost savings to the Department of Transportation. The bill consolidates civil filing fees and subsequently eliminates 9,000 court filing fees, creating cost savings to the judicial branch. LSA's run the numbers for the last 3 years. The Senate also has worked on this bill, and take the latest one took into account current payment rates, all of that. The bill is revenue neutral. That's been defining the LSA for 3 years in a row. The bill provides for an enhanced penalty for criminal destruction of certain agricultural properties, which I think is very important given the current environment and the trespassing that is taking place in our agricultural industry. And our food supply and the agricultural industry obviously are critical to Iowa and to the rest of the nation. And the bill is a companion to Senate File 2374, which is the Albright fix, along with some other bills that we talked about. And it reduces that 35 to 15% on those additional costs. So I think there's a lot of good things in this legislation. I certainly would be happy to work with Representative Wolfe on that $500, and whether it's appropriate to reduce that or direct it in a certain way, we can certainly have those conversations.
Representative Holt, just a little insight on the ag theft bills. I actually started that bill 4 or 5 years ago, and at that time, we were going to deposit the money into IDOLs for some sort of education for farmers to try to stop that. One of the interesting pieces of information at that time, LSA or somebody provided me with, was that there are more ag thefts in Iowa than there are stolen cars. So it's real easy to back into a farm site and load livestock or commodities. And in this day and age where people are doing stuff during the middle of the night, I mean, I loaded cattle the other day at 4:30 in the morning, and the neighbors don't, it's normal circumstances. So if a semi backs into the barn and I'm not the one there, most of the neighbors just think that's normal. So we have cameras that watch our buildings, but it is a huge problem.
Thank you, Representative Hein. Again, I think this is a great piece of legislation, and we're going to advance it. So thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.